Alright, so I didn't want to do a full theory video, but I did want to discuss some of my thoughts on Poppy Playtime. Poppy Playtime Chapter 5. I mean, if I can quote SpongeBob here for a minute, is like, Why? Why did you set me on fire, game devs? Why didn't you just finish the story? Stop wasting time! So yeah, basically, it's no secret at this point. Most of the Poppy Playtime fan base has agreed that Chapter 5 had too much filler. Uh, too much filler. There were too many puzzles that didn't really have to do with anything. It takes us way too long to get to the next, like, interesting horror set piece. I mean, between the Huggy chase at the beginning, you have the Automals, like one segment with the Automals, and they're like another reskin of the Smiling Critters, and you basically get a tool that like instantly nerfs them, so you never have to worry about them again. And then you meet Giblet, and all that segment up till meeting Giblet is fine, and I'd even argue up till meeting Brawn is fine as well because I don't know, it's just nice to see the giant Brawn and um, it kind of brings things full circle. I mean, Braun was a character that I think the fan base liked a lot more than the game developers. So seeing like an actual version of Braun in the game is pretty cool. But then after that, a lot of the game is just filler. It's just pointless puzzles. It's like puzzle after puzzle after puzzle until you get to the brainwashing rooms. Once you get to the brainwashing rooms, I would say the game picks up quite a bit. Like you get to the brainwashing rooms and you get to see like the Huggy Wuggy tapes and everything, or not tapes, but like memory sequences. Um, that stuff was really good. That was really good horror. It was nice to see a horror element in live action in the series. I guess is because like those tapes actually did have a lot of potential for like live action horror, but it seems like most of the live action horror stuff they did were like the ARG stuff that a lot of people didn't watch. So actually getting to see some of that live action horror in the game itself is pretty good. I really enjoyed that segment. I like Lily Lovebraids. People have like mixed opinions on her. I like her. I like her dollhouse. You know, when I was a kid, I always used to pretend that like my shelves were like the map of a video game, and like I'd take my little minifigures and imagine like fake Lego games out of them, just like going across my shelves and stuff. And we even had like an old dollhouse. We had like half a dollhouse, I think it was. I don't think it was a full dollhouse. I think it was like half a dollhouse. Um, just kind of worn out over the years. And so I kind of related to that a lot. Um, it was some nice mechanics with those puzzles and stuff, and the chase sequence with the Lily upgrades, I think that was bad. I didn't really like that chase sequence. It's like in a chase sequence, you gotta communicate what you need to do a lot better. Like here's the thing with the chase sequence is that you immediately need to know what to do, and that's been a big problem with Poppy Playtime in general. In a chase sequence, you always have to know what the next step of the chase is. You always have to know, okay, uh, like okay, I use this hand on this like scanner, or I grab this very easily seen bar or something. Um, it's like during a chase sequence, you need to communicate that stuff a lot better. You need to not have a lot of distractions and background noise, and you need to you need to point the player in the right direction all the time during like a chase sequence like that. And that was like probably one of the worst chase sequences in Poppy Playtime. I liked the idea of it. I did not like the execution of it. And then of course, okay, anyone who has not played Chapter 5 right now, you might want to get out now. Of course, the big thing we got to talk about is that we finally got to see him. We finally got to see the prototype. And I got to say, I like his design. He doesn't look like what I thought he was going to look like. We were all kind of expecting the amalgamation of parts, whereas in this design, it just seems like, okay, he's got some parts on him, but he's not like an amalgamation of parts. He's just got some parts on him. I do like his design. I like the main bit being a jester. I know it looks a little bit Amazing Digital Circus-y, but I like the creepy jester. I like creepy jesters. Um, it he's got this large, imposing presence, and like seeing him enter the dollhouse for the first time was just a treat. That was something we've been waiting for. That was something we wanted to see. And then the chase sequence with him on the train was fine, but it also had some of the same problems that Lily Lovebraid's segment did. In the sense that it didn't immediately communicate to you what you need to do during this chase sequence. That's the thing about chase sequences. You need to know exactly what you're doing as you're doing it. Otherwise, the chase sequence just falls flat. Um, once you die, it loses all of its value. Um, so one thing I will say is that I liked Chapter 5, but it is the worst chapter of the game so far. It's worse than Chapter 1. Chapter 1 was really good. Don't get me wrong, it's just like, this 5-hour segment of the game is a lot worse than this 30-minute segment of the game. This 30-minute segment of the game is a much better experience than this 5-hour experience of the game. And that's that should really that should really get you to think over what you're doing. I think it was entirely possible to make Chapter 5 the last chapter, and I do think that was the original idea. However, I have thought about it a little more, and I thought that perhaps there is a reason Chapter 5 is not the final chapter of the game. Perhaps they want to go down a different route, which requires a sixth chapter, maybe even a seventh chapter. And I'll kind of like explain what I think is going to happen. So I think before I get to like the main thing I want to talk about in this, I'll just like present one little mini theory. So we were all expecting the prototype to be a big amalgamation of parts, right? Well, I think there is technically one way they could still do that. In the sense that the prototype might be outside in. Alright? He might be outside in. He might have most of his body parts inside that big mass of his. Um like it's a very like thick metal body sort of area he's got there. Maybe inside that metal towards like his like torso area. Maybe inside of that is like a whole bunch of toy parts. So it's like he has the toy parts inside of him, and if he turns inside out during the during like the final boss, we could get like this completely different interpretation of the prototype that still kind of represents him and still probably have like his gestury bits, but um, it's kind of like if you rip open the metal segment, there's like it's kind of like a Jack in the Box or like a bunch of clowns stuffed inside a tiny car. It's like that little metal abdomen thing he's got just has like this compressed mass of toy and flesh stuff that just springs out. I think that could be a very interesting way of doing that, and also fits the idea of like a clown or a Jack in the Box, sort of like that. Kind of fits that as well. Um, or should I think I said outside in. I think they're called wrong side out. Was what they were called. Wrong side out. Um, it said outside in. Uh, you get what I'm getting at, right? Because like it very much so seemed like that um, opening cutscene was more of a thematic thing. It wasn't a it wasn't meant to denote, oh, this is like one of the most important characters of this chapter right here. If they're gonna do that, they probably should have done an ad for Lily Lovebraids instead. But or Huggy Wuggy. You know, that was kind of what I was hoping they would do for the final chapter, was that they were going to give us an ad for Huggy Wuggy. That was kind of what I was hoping they would do before this chapter came out. But I do think they actually do have an ad made for Huggy Wuggy that they had since like the chapter 1 days, because I think they do make those type of commercials for like all of their toys. It's just they only put one in the opening commercial based on what they think is the most important character to advertise at that moment. Because the chapter one had Poppy. The chapter 1 commercial was like the Poppy commercial, if I remember right. So now we're gonna get into what I really want to talk about. I think I can kind of guess what they want us to do for chapter 6. I'm going to call chapter 6 Errand Boy. And I'll discuss sort of my evidence for this. So, we know at the very least that Chum Chompkins is forced to do stuff for the prototype. I think there is a possibility that Giblet is forced to do stuff for the prototype as well. Like, these two characters, they don't really like the prototype, but they're kind of like forced to do what the prototype says. They're forced to be errand boys for the prototype. I think the plot of chapter 6 is that you, the player, are going to become one of those. You, the player, are going to be an errand boy for the prototype. And I think one of the big pieces of information I had for this is that scene where the prototype is talking to Chum. He says, we need to turn the security system back on. We need eyes everywhere. And that wording, eyes everywhere, that should be familiar, because in chapter 4, that's what Harley Sawyer was portrayed as. Harley Sawyer was portrayed as the eyes everywhere. These are the eyes on like all the different TV monitors. And we do know that, like, you know, it is very well established that the partnership between the prototype and Harley Sawyer is very tenuous. But it was established that they were working together on some goal. And so I think what happened is that Harley Sawyer was rebooted at the prototype's request. Now, could we still see Harley Sawyer rebel against the prototype? I definitely think we could. Of course, you might have the question of, oh, well, which of these two is the bigger of the two evils? You know, which which of these two do I trust more, the creepy eyeball or the child trapped inside a jester robot? Oh, and by the way, that's another spoiler. There's a tape that makes it very, very clear that the prototype, the human that was turned into the prototype, was Ollie Ludwig. This is Elliot Ludwig's adopted son. There's a tape that made that very clear. A lot of people were thinking that Elliot was just going to be the prototype. But it seems like, no, it seems the idea is that Ollie was a real kid, but he was turned into the prototype. Um, and the reason he is the prototype is because this was the experiment Elliot did to see if he could bring his daughter Poppy back to life. Like, so Elliot's daughter Poppy, she died, and Elliot became obsessed with trying to bring Poppy back to life. So then Elliot decides to adopt a child for the sole reason of putting him through this experimental process. And he's like, oh, it's okay. I still love you. We still gotta be a family and everything. It's just, uh, look. I still care about you. I still care about you and everything. But it is very clear that you know, Elliot loved his biological daughter more than his adopted son. Uh, I think it's also implied that Ollie and Poppy never really met each other before Poppy's death. I think that is implied. I could be wrong about that though. Um, and so really, I think what Chapter 6 is going to do is that we're going to have a hand. We're going to basically be forced at gunpoint to help the prototype and Harley Sawyer reach the secret that they were trying to find. Now, I have two ideas on what this secret they were trying to crack is. I have two ideas. I think the one they're going to go for I think the one they're going to go for is that Harley and the prototype are trying to discover the secrets of immortality. William Afton style, right? They're trying to discover the secrets of immortality so that they can bring immortality to maybe the orphans, I guess. The orphans, probably. But also, it's just like, oh, this is a big scientific discovery in general. I mean, like Harley's goal in this is probably just for the scientific discovery. I don't actually know if he wants to live forever. It's just like he's doing science for the sake of science. They're Elon Musking the shit. They're trying to find eternal life through robot bodies. I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk ever did anything like that. Um, so I think that's what they're going for. They're trying to kind of put their own make their own eternal life. They're trying to make their own uh they're trying to make their own heaven because in the prototype's words, there's no hope from above. Uh yeah, right. um and so I think that's what they're going for. But this other idea, this could be interesting if they go in this direction. Elliot Ludwig is dead, right? It's pretty well established that Elliot Ludwig is dead in this series. I think it might be the case that the prototype is trying to bring Elliot back to life. Because Elliot promised that, oh hey, when Poppy comes back, we can all be like this big family. Um, however, of course, Elliot was an old man. He probably died of old age, and um, it is kind of the thing. They kind of established this idea that although the prototype kind of hated Playtime Co. for turning him into like this big robot monster and turning his friends into toys, um, it is established that the prototype is kind of following in Playtime Co.'s footsteps, whether intentionally or not. Um, and I've kind of dealt with this in a story of my own. Uh, this was a theme towards the end of Planetary Lullaby. I sort of wrote that the character Chemmel, as the story goes on, he gets more and more convinced that the idea of bringing nothing is stupid. But by the end of the story, he still goes for doing it anyway because he had lost so much that that was basically his only choice left. I won't spoil what exactly Chemmel loses. It's pretty it's it's a pretty cool scene, if I do say so myself, and I do. I say so. I really like that scene where Chemmel lost what he lost, but essentially that's like Chemmel's motivation is that he lost everything, so all he has left is this idea of bringing nothing. And so although he has the choice to not go through with bringing that nothing, he still goes through with it anyway because it's all he believes he has left. And so I think that's very similar to what they're doing with the prototype. I think the idea with the prototype is, although he always hated Playtime Co. for like these toy experiments and stuff, his better place that Elliot promised is all he has left. In his mind, this is all he has left. So he must do what he can to bring about that a better place. Um, and it could also be in a semblance. It could be that they're trying to do both of these things, right? It could be that the reason the prototype is going through with these experiments is because he wants to bring his dad back to life, Elliot. Whereas Harley is doing this to crack the secrets of immortality because that's like the big in Harley's mind, that's like the pinnacle of science. That's like the big thing that the scientific process has been leading to, is discovering the secrets to obtaining immortality. So it's sort of like they have two different goals, but they kind of align, so they're working with each other even though they hate each other. And so I think that's where Popular Playtime is going. Now, I have thought about this as well. I have thought that there is a possibility that the player is Elliot Ludwig. I don't think this is the case. I don't think this is the case. And if this was not planned from the beginning, I don't think the game dev should go in this direction because that would just complicate things. I think it is possible that the player is Elliot Ludwig, and the reason he didn't show up for work during the Hour of Joy is because, well, Elliot just handed the factory over to Leith Pierre. I don't think this is the case. I think Elliot was so old that he wouldn't be alive in 2005 anyway. I wanted to bring it up just in case that happens, because it is something that I could see happening. And it would also explain why the prototype's so pissed off at us. Now, I do think, a lot of people question why the prototype didn't just kill us. Why did the prototype put us in the poppy gel so that we could come back to life? Well, I think there's two reasons for this. Number one is that we're probably like one of those experiments to try and get the formula to work properly, right? Like, the prototype has to take what he can get to sort of like put this process into place. So it's like, of course he needs test subjects. I mean, we're gonna be one of those. Number two, they turned Miss Gracie into a toy because everyone hated Miss Gracie. Like, it's established that that's the reason they turned Miss Gracie into Lily Lovebraids. They just hated Miss Gracie. They hated her. And so it seems like the idea that a character who is very hated amongst the prototype and his followers, a character who is well hated. It will not be given the satisfaction of death. They are going to be brought back to life as a toy to suffer forever. That's it's well established that that's what they do. And I think we would be one of the characters that the prototype just hates. I think we would be one of the characters the prototypes just hates because we're the ones who like escaped during the hour of joy. We're the ones who did not go into work. We're the ones who sort of skedaddled out of our punishment, right? We're the ones who just didn't show up. And so, in the prototype's eyes, it's like we have just kind of been a coward and we're unwilling to face our punishment for years. And so, of course, the prototype is going to hate us for that. Hate us. One last thing I'd like to discuss. I think that was like my big thing is like I want to get my predictions out for how Chapter 6 is going to go. I think one last thing I do want to briefly mention. I encourage you all to go back and re-watch the prototype introduction scene at the mansion, because the scene where the prototype picks up Poppy by the head and holds her over the table and then she cracks, it is very clearly choreographed in the prototype's face that he did not mean to do that. Like it's a very subtle thing, but if you look at that scene and you look at the moment where Poppy's head cracks, the prototype like moves back a little bit, like he's surprised at what he just did, and then he looks at his hands like is like, oh shit, that's my own strength. And then the prototype looks at the player and is like, oh yeah, you fucks were the one who turned me into this thing. So just I would encourage you to do that, because that is one theory I definitely believe in, is that the prototype does not want to hurt Poppy. The prototype cares about Poppy. It's probably because he is Ollie, right? Like, he sees Poppy as a sister even though he never met her. And of course when Lily Lovebraids, she's like Lily Lovebraids is all like, oh, Poppy's a bad toy, throw her in the box. And it's like at the end of the dinner, like Lily Lovebraids tries to take Poppy with her hair. And then the prototype's like, you stop it. Nope. Nope, you don't. Nope. It's really interesting stuff. So what I'll say about Poppy Playtime, I think they should end the series at Chapter 6. I definitely think they shouldn't do any more than 7 chapters. Uh, like, okay, 5 is the standard, and if you want to be like FNAF, technically you can go up to 7. Technically you can lie about how many nights there are and go up to 7 chapters. But afterwards, you're just being Garten of Banban. And I like Garten of Banban. And I think Garten of Banban is actually fair to put out like as many games as they are putting out. But Garten of Banban embraces its silliness. Garten of Banban is very self-aware at just how much of a weird experience it is. Poppy Playtime has taken itself very seriously. I mean, it's a little self-aware. But Poppy Playtime is overall a more serious story. Poppy Playtime is overall something you are supposed to take a lot more seriously than something like Garten of Banban, in which Garten of Banban, pretty much since the inception, was like, okay, you can laugh at this game. You can laugh at this game a little bit. We're still gonna put a lot of effort into it, make it scary, but you know, you can laugh. You can laugh at our game. We laugh at our game. You can laugh at it too. Poppy Playtime is the type of thing where it cannot be dragged out for very long. And I think that's why a lot of people are upset that it did not end at chapter 5, because 5 is the standard for these type of games. Once you go past 5, you technically can go past 5 and still have like a very good cohesive experience, but there is too much game now. There is too much Poppy playtime now. Like, just in general, there is too much Poppy playtime. Um, and that's kind of why these series are supposed to end after chapter 5, is that you don't have too much game. And honestly, that was one of my problems in coming back to Nick and Lazuli, in which I have not returned to work on Nick and Lazuli, and you cannot prove that I have. One of my problems with returning to Nick and Lazuli is that there is just too much game there. There's too much Nick and Lazuli that already exists. There is a lot of Poppy playtime that exists right now. And a lot of it is just filler puzzles. A lot of it is just like 10 puzzles between each of the major story and horror events. Too many puzzles between each main event. And it does get to be exhausting after a while. I think chapter 6 should be shorter than chapter 5. That's what I think. I think chapter 6 should aim to be shorter than chapter 5. At the very least, I don't want to see filler in chapter 6. I mean, you're going to have some puzzles, obviously. But, like, the game already has enough puzzles. At this point, we just want to see the horror, and we want to see the story. We want to see the conclusion to the story, and we want to see what types of horror you guys got in store. You can put puzzles in between each little bit, because, like, that's just how the game progresses. But sometimes it's okay to just have a sequence in a game where you just walk. It's okay to have a sequence in a game where you just walk to the next room. That's okay. That's a perfectly fine thing for you to put in a game. It's not a walking simulator unless that's like an hour of walking, or something like that. That's my thoughts on Poppy Playtime Chapter 5. That's kind of my theory for what's going to happen in Chapter 6. I'm not going to put together a full Poppy Playtime timeline. I'm bad at timelines unless I can get like every little piece of information on the years involved with any given event. Like how Petscop was. Petscop was like all the information was just there in each of the videos. You just had to meticulously go through them and pay attention to every little thing that everyone says. Poppy Playtime is going to be a lot harder to do that because it's like this big environment that you got to go around and get all these tapes and get all these audio tapes and then like get all these notes and stuff. And it's, I mean, technically you can go on YouTube and look up a full video of them, but I don't know about that. Other people have put together Poppy Playtime timelines. I mainly wanted to put together my predictions for the next chapter. Is kind of what I wanted to do. I like this game. I'm gonna be honest that towards the end of like Nick and Lazuli episode 14, the idea of the prototype as being this figure who has like his own sense of compassion, but also does a lot of messed up, horrible things. I did take some of that as inspiration for the character of Sattermon. Sattermon did exist as a character before I got into Poppy Playtime, but there were some elements of Poppy Playtime's story that helped me flesh out that character a lot more as I was writing him. And so, like, this idea of this very powerful figure who does have a sense of compassion, but does incredibly messed up things to for what he believes is the betterment of his quote-unquote children. The prototype did actually influence a little bit of that portrayal, and so I definitely like this game. Um, but I'm invested in a story because there is a destination. I know it's not about the destination, but that's still a very important part of the journey. Is that there is a destination, and I don't want to see this go on indefinitely, like Ban. I want it to see its conclusion at a certain point, and I think if they go the errand boy route, I think that does mean that Chapter 6 is justified. But for the next installment, they should have less puzzles. Um, they should put a lot less time between each major event of the game. Um, and I just think there needs to be more stuff to kill the player in Chapter 6. Because in Chapter 5, you had a Huggy Wuggy chase at the beginning, the incredibly easy to deal with Automals, and then you get through so much of the game until Lily Love Braids. And then there's like a very short Huggy Wuggy chase, which leads into a much larger prototype chase. It's like those four characters. Um, it's like those four characters, one of which isn't even a threat, I'd argue, with the Automals. And then Uh, but of course, I don't want them to introduce like a whole bunch of new characters. I don't want them to introduce like a whole. I think they should use the characters they have for their sequences, but it's like you could have like a full game of just like, um, yeah, Chapter 6. If it is the errand boy route, you could do stuff like the parts and service stuff in Sister Location, right? Where it's like you got to do these tasks very carefully, or they'll kill you, right? I think it could be something like that if Chapter 6 is Errand Boy. And of course, Chapter 6, I want it to be the ending. I want it to be the final boss. And I think the final boss would be the prototype. But also, you know, it is possible they brought back Harley Sawyer to be the actual final boss. That is possible. And I could see a reality where that works. Because, well, I mean, the prototype's Ollie. He's the mind of a kid. And that's obviously a lot easier to sympathize with than the doctor, who only cares about science. And that is one thing I will say in the story so far, is that the prototype is much more sympathetic than the doctor. And that could go somewhere. Um, I think I restated a lot of the things I wanted to get across. This hasn't been scripted. It has been a rant. That's kind of been the purpose of this, but I think I need to end the video now so I don't rant anymore. All this to say, I will stick around for Chapter 6. Um, I still like the game, but Chapter 5 is Chapter 5 is the worst chapter so far, and I also think we're way overdue for an ending to this series.